Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're having yourselves a wonderful day. Going to be jumping back into the SCP universe here with the Exploring series. We're going to be checking out Exploring the SCP Foundation Pataphysics. I believe that's how it's pronounced. P-A-T-A physics. So Pataphysics. This has been a video that several people have been talking about and requested, so I figured we'd take a look at it and see what this is all about. Links down below in the description, as always, to the original video and without my commentary and reaction, and to the Exploring series channel. Please do me a favor, click those links. If you enjoy this video as we go through it, go over there and give it a like. And if you enjoy the Exploring series content and you are not already subscribed to him, please do me a favor, going over there and hitting that sub button on his channel. Makes a lot of wonderful content for the SCP universe, as well as others. So if you could do me a favor, if you enjoy this content, give the man some love. If you'd like to join us when we do these discussions live, as you can see we currently are, we'd love to have you guys come in here, join our discussions, add to the conversation. You can do so by hitting the join button underneath the video. There's also a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I offer. Take a look at those if you've been around the channel for a while and decide you want to take your support to the next level. Get early access videos, priority in any kind of reaction requests, name at the end of the video, access to special Discord channels, etc., etc. So take a look at those and see if any of that would interest you. With all that said, shameless plugs done. Let's get into the video here. Again, this is Exploring the SCP Foundation Pataphysics. Boop, boop.
Pataphysics. I've talked about a number of metaphysical SCPs so far throughout this series, those being articles that look at concepts above the normal level of reality. SCPs that look at things like the afterlife, the nature of the human soul, and the existence of God or gods could be considered metaphysical.
Some very trippy
so there's
artwork
a fair
here.
amount of them. Pataphysics, on the other hand, is a bit trickier, as it looks at concepts one step up from metaphysics. This is quite difficult to define in our reality, but in the SCP universe, this is generally represented in the form of the SCP Foundation realizing that they themselves are fictional.
Gotcha. Okay.
This idea largely...
So kind of like fourth wall things, where they realize their universe is a fictional universe that is being created by multiple sources, I would assume. Which, who knows, that could be the case in our reality too, man. You know, it's one of the things that I always loved about the Men in Black movies at the very end. They keep seeing it like pulling out further and further and further, and then our universe is just, you know, like a little set of marbles being played with by some other alien entity, you know. Who knows, man? Could be.
Stems from S. Andrew Swan's 001 proposal.
This is another one that's pretty much impossible to put in a video, so I went with a random assortment of cool art rather than just pictures of beaches or something. Well, there you go.
In which the Foundation discovers that their reality
with
is
some
subject
Vikings.
to the machinations of a bunch of writers. Pataphysical SCPs often involve concepts that are more or less strictly imaginary, as far as the SCP universe is concerned,
Gotcha.
that begin to impact their reality through anomalous means. Rather than really trying to dig deep and explain things, I think it's best that we just dive into some pataphysical SCPs.
Okay.
Let's start with something relatively simple, SCP-1304, a method of ritual murder with a lengthy list of requirements that, when performed in a fictional narrative, brings the victim into reality.
Gotcha.
The narrative must be published by a major publishing house for the anomalous effect to trigger, and no later than 1 week after publishing, a child will be born whose life will mirror, as close as possible, the life of the killed character.
Interesting.
Characters from wholly fictional places and locales will be born in real places as similar as possible, even if the character hails from another planet or dimension entirely. Other events in the character's life will carry out for the individual, such as losing their parents at a certain age. Fantasy or science fiction elements will appear in an analogous form, such as a pet dragon becoming a pet horse.
Oh, interesting.
This individual will be seemingly unaware of the nature of their creation, and those informed of the specifics of their associated narrative find it to be nothing more than a curious coincidence. Any and all attempts to alter the life of one of these individuals in a way that explicitly contradicts the narrative their lives are based on will completely fail. In one experiment, in which a character's dog is killed in a car accident on their 17th birthday, the Foundation cordoned off an area 3 kilometers around the individual's home on their 17th birthday. Despite their efforts, involving more than 100 agents, a drunk driver was still able to slip through the cordon, evade pursuit, and strike the individual's dog.
So no matter what happens, fate has to play out, essentially, is what they're basically saying.
Even something as minor and simple as altering an individual's daily route to work, if it was described in the novel, proves impossible. The only deviation that occurs for these individuals from the original narrative is the actual ritual murder. Every individual created through this process lives past the point where they would be killed, at which point their life can be altered as normal.
Gotcha.
Attempts by the Foundation to recreate SCP-1304 have so far failed, as any narrative they have published doesn't produce the desired effect. It's unclear how so many authors have independently discovered the means to reproduce this anomaly. At least 76 narratives have been published so far, with various authors claiming the ritual came to them in a dream, or they were inspired by a film, or they were unclear where they got the idea from. It is revealed, though, that after the point in an individual's life in which their character counterpart had died, the individual seems to lose some sort of spark of life. Their minds become duller, their lives become grayer, and they lose the desire to grow. The head researcher wonders if they are reflections of their characters, and they lose their shine once the reflection is gone, or if they have now completed their purpose in life, and have become nothing more than puppets without puppeteers.
You can see that, yeah.
Finally, the Foundation decides to try carrying out the ritual murder in the real world, on an unfortunate D-class. They didn't notice any anomalous effects from the ritual. However,
On a side note, are those ticks? Because that's disgusting.
hidden in the text of the article are various pleas for help from an individual, stating that they are not supposed to be here, and that they don't want him here, they want to hurt him. It seems that some part of the D-class was reflected in some other dimension, although the specifics of what happened are left unsaid. As I said, that one is relatively simple, but demonstrates more of what we're discussing here, that being different levels of fiction and reality intersecting on one another through anomalous means.
Metal Gear.
Moving from books to a television show, SCP-2614 is a DVD copy of the 5th season of The Sopranos television show.
Okay.
The disc is otherwise
Which, classic show, definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it.
normal, unless the play button is pressed on a remote during a specific scene in the show. If pressed, the remote will now allow control over the camera view of the show, utilizing the directional pad and the center button.
Interesting.
The camera will be free-moving and fully maneuverable, but unable to pass through solid objects. Despite being in control of the camera, the events of the show will continue to transpire in real time, and the scenes will no longer transition where they normally would, allowing the viewer to observe events outside of the script.
You can just literally
The fictional
view the world
world
how you
inside
want
of
it
the
to.
show is filled with a large number of individuals, and researchers even took the camera to the city of Boston to see the extent of habitation.
Huh. So it's almost like you would literally be able to go into, like, the show is turned into its own universe in the TV, and we're able to just roam around and browse it. Like, every time you're actually... It honestly is kind of a thought that I've always, like, had, you know, what if every time we start up a game, that universe gets created somewhere, and we're, you know, in some reality, and then when we turn it off, same thing with movies, etc. Like, you know, are we watching some kind of reality played out somewhere, and then it ends as soon as the movie's over? So the idea of, you know, the show being its own universe, and then you being able to go out and browse it, that's a pretty interesting concept.
Despite the overall realism presented, there are some oddities present due to it being a televised world, such as major characters being unusually audible in social situations. The Foundation spends some time wandering the world of The Sopranos, observing characters outside of scripted scenes as they act in an expected manner. The DVD had the word bookshelf written on it in black marker, which directed researchers to a bookshelf in The Sopranos' living room. Here they found a note written in a journal reading, "Art is the emanation of man. Man, the emanation of nature. God, the grandfather of art." In other words, God creates man, man creates art, therefore art wouldn't exist without God.
Right.
The Foundation then discovers that if they move the camera into a screen showing some other form of media inside of the Sopranos world, they can actually move into that world as well.
Oh, now we're getting into some
discover
Inception
this
shit.
by moving into a screen at a library showing the Wizard of Oz. They move the camera east for a number of days before entering what appears to be an outer space void colored pink and yellow. Still in the Wizard of Oz world, they move to a private showing of the Disney film Snow White. In this world, they move upwards until they see a continent separate to the one the events of the film take place on. Moving to this continent, they discover a young man in
Talk about going down the rabbit hole, brother. Good lord.
combat with a boar-like creature, and it's revealed that the princess's stepmother is a dark sorceress that had been manipulating events to ensure the crown for her youngest son. At this point, since there are no TV screens here, the researchers reset
Can't go
things
any
back
further,
to the
yeah.
Sopranos world and move into a screen showing an episode of The Simpsons.
Like, what would happen, you know, like, okay, you go into the Sopranos world, and then in the Sopranos world, you go into the screen that is the Wizard of Oz, and you move around in there. What happens if someone in the Sopranos world turns off the screen that is the Wizard of Oz? Are you trapped in there? You know, are you stuck in the Wizard of Oz world then? Like, what happens?
When the camera is moved out of the primary city of Springfield, researchers found characters in the style of the show Family Guy, despite the crossover episode between the two airing 10 years after this specific fifth season episode of The Sopranos. The cartoon physics of The Simpsons world was observed to cause considerable environmental and occasionally urban devastation. Back in the Sopranos world, researchers went into a number of other films, including The Last Temptation of Christ, in which, after the final scene, the screen flickers to white rather than going to credits, and the forward movement of the camera was left on overnight. The next day, the camera was stopped in front of a luminescent female figure. The rest of that experiment has been expunged.
I wonder if that's supposed to be the Mother Mary or whatever.
Then they try a few other experiments, such as entering a commercial which descends into chaos after the 24 seconds of runtime is up, and an MP3 visualization on a computer, which consisted of a dark blue void with other waveforms in the distance, believed to be visualizations playing on other computer screens. Things get really weird though when they decide to enter a screen displaying a popular TV show inside of the Sopranos universe called Sandman. In one scene of the show, another note in a journal was found, reading, "There was no God here, though I cried. I found his shadow and could not die."
That sounds
Going one
terrifying.
step further, inside of the Sandman show, which is inside of Sopranos, there is a popular long-running sitcom called Caroline. The Foundation managed to enter this show, but found its world completely uninhabited. What they did find, however, was a film playing inside of an abandoned home, a slasher movie titled Snakebite. Upon entering the film during a scene in which the killer corners the main character in a swamp, both characters turn and look directly at the camera.
Yikes.
They otherwise remain unresponsive, and while moving the character out of the swamp and into a local movie theater, all characters found behave the same way.
That would be creepy as fuck.
Camera. In the theater, a romantic film is playing, displaying a scene set in a diner. Upon entering this film, the diner's lights become a deep red color, along with the rest of the...
It's almost like being in the mind of God or super consciousness, generating stories and traveling from story to story is like you're in a yeah. Right. It definitely like makes you wonder how like reality and stuff is, you know? Because I mean, who says that if you didn't have the power to do this, this wouldn't be how things are, you know?
Lighting in this world. The surrounding city appears to be uninhabited. The sky is black and devoid of stars, although a dark red glow is seen on the horizon in all directions. All of the television sets present in this world displayed only static, so researchers decided to enter one.
Poltergeist.
Once inside, the static appeared more like a cloud or field as the camera moved through. Eventually, the camera view ended up in a brightly lit hallway, only allowing for forward movement. As the camera advanced,
So they entered the Matrix and they're going down that hallway to the architect. Okay.
the image became more saturated, and the rest of the data is expunged.
Interesting.
An attached note tells us that this data is concurrent with pataphysical hypermodel DMRG. DMRG seemingly stands for demiurge, an entity in Gnosticism believed to be akin to a false god who creates a false reality to deceive mortals.
Huh.
Basically, the Foundation went a bit too deep, and they don't like what they're seeing here. Not a god, but a shadow of a god. That was a hallway inside of a romantic film, inside of a slasher film,
Right.
inside of a sitcom, inside of a serial drama, inside of a serial drama. So we're getting pretty pataphysical here.
Yeah, you're talking about going through multiple layers of reality and what that really means. You know what I'm saying? Like, and who creates those various realities, you know, and is it a situation where, you know, okay, God created our reality, we're then creating these realities for our entertainment, and the TV is the portal to that reality, you know, and then there's sub-realities from that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like, you're getting into some crazy shit there, man. You're getting into some crazy shit there, man. And then essentially, like, what does that really mean? Would we essentially call ourselves God at that point because we're creating realities, you know? And then is our reality just another version of something like that? If someone were to pull back outside of ours, you know?
Let's scale things down slightly, though, and look at SCP-3166. A 2.1 meter tall humanoid that's presumed to be pataphysical in nature and only manifests when the Garfield media franchise is performing poorly in terms of public reception.
Interesting.
This entity's exterior is covered
very
with
specific.
cat fur, resembling a crudely made costume of the Garfield character, while its interior is composed entirely out of lasagna. When the Garfield franchise is performing poorly, 3166 will manifest near a suitable individual and begin to approach them with violent intentions. The individual can be someone involved in rival media to the Garfield franchise, someone formerly involved in the production of the comic strip, individuals involved in Garfield parodies, vocal critics of the franchise, or Garfield creator Jim Davis himself, if he was responsible for the franchise's negative reception. Upon reaching the target, 3166 will attempt to harm them through a mixture of blunt force trauma and force-feeding them lasagna, obtained from self-disembowelment.
Jesus.
3166 can be drawn away from this goal by the presence of lasagna, as it will make absorbing the lasagna into itself its primary focus.
Like, lasagna is good and all, but that sounds terrible.
Through the attacking process, 3166 will vocalize by making various sounds akin to an extremely agitated cat. 3166 first manifested on October 23, 1989 within the Chicago offices of United Media, who published the Garfield comic strip at the time. 3166 wandered around the offices in a confused and distressed manner before assaulting anyone nearby. It disappeared 20 minutes later, although it would continue to appear in United Media offices around the country throughout the rest of the week. It's believed that the Garfield comic strip from October 23rd shows the entity's pataphysical awakening, and no one working on the strip at the time remembers creating that comic.
Interesting.
Finally, it was determined that the meat present in the entity's interior lasagna is genetically identical to that of Jim Davis, who has complained of severe mosquito bites on nights preceding 3166 manifestations.
Yikes.
Aside from the obvious comedic factor of it being an anthropomorphic version of Garfield filled with lasagna, it's a pretty interesting SCP, and a little worrisome, as the Foundation isn't sure why it appeared in the first place, and can't really control it, outside of ensuring the Garfield franchise remains successful. Let's get back into the deep end, though, with SCP-3309.
As if we weren't in the deep end before, let's jump into it.
It begins with a notice from the Pataphysics department that this file describes an unpredictable narrativic
more than a little concerning,
intersecting with multiple sub-narrative layers. Yep, sounds pretty pataphysical. We have to be inoculated against the embedded narrativo hazards before we can continue, which involves reading a specific paragraph. Sometimes we don't fade until it's too late, until we've withered to the bone, and at the end there's nothing left. It's forgotten. Memories, hopes, dreams, were all forgotten. How can we know that people even have these memories, these hopes, and these dreams? Who could forget us if there was nothing there to begin with? We fade from the minds of others, but not from our own. We live with it until we can't live any longer, until we forget that there was ever any way we could live in peace. And then that's when we fade away. Fade away. That finished, we learn that SCP-3309 is a phenomenon in which cataloged anomalies spontaneously disappear, including anomalous objects, entities, locations, and conceptual structures. So basically anything with an SCP designation.
Right.
Between 24 and 36 hours before the disappearance, a note is added to the SCP's file, which states that if you are not the author and you want to rewrite this article, you may reply to this post asking for the opportunity to do so.
Interesting.
Please obtain permission from the author. For those unaware, this message is posted whenever an SCP on the SCP Wiki becomes too low rated.
I figured as much there was something along those lines. Like, you're getting into, like, yeah, I figured something like that was going to happen. It was going to be a situation where something on the actual wiki, if you wanted to rewrite the article, and they're like translating it into the actual SCP universe, another fourth wall thing,
and is marked for deletion. After the 24 to 36 hours, all documents related to the SCP are wiped from the Foundation's file systems, including their most secure servers, and the anomaly itself becomes either neutralized or disappears entirely.
Gotcha.
What's worse, around 71% of disappearing documents are connected to other unaffected anomalies, leading to a weakening of the Foundation's overall containment network. The Foundation decides to see what connects the anomalies that are disappearing, which amounts to around 40 each month. Affected items often involve documentation with excessive containment procedures, with either a misunderstanding of the anomaly's nature or an unprofessional level of care involved. They also tend to be powerful enough to threaten end-of-the-world scenarios, although documentation only outlines partial consequences of the anomaly, and the documents tend to be poorly written or filled with logical and grammatical errors. Again, the meta nature of this is hard to miss, as it's poking fun at the large amount of articles that are submitted to the SCP Wiki every month, and are soon deleted due to not being well received. The Foundation, however, looked over these criteria and decided—
Dude, that is a trippy-ass looking photo right there.
Decided to try altering the documentation for some bothersome anomalies to try and make them disappear. This seems to conflict with the earlier statement that 3309 is weakening their overall containment network, but the Ethics Committee puts the proposal to a vote, and it narrowly passes. They decide to test it on SCP-4463, an anomaly that they can't really control and could flood the entire North American continent in 50 years.
Okay.
The documentation was changed to include heavy grammatical errors and significant inconsistencies among related effects of the anomaly, along with adding various fabricated addenda and an unrelated image. Not long after, 4463 was completely removed from all Foundation databases, and investigations proved that the anomaly itself was no longer active. Mission accomplished, and SCP-3309 is reclassified as Thaumiel, after testing it on 19 other anomalies.
Gotcha.
We're then given a note from an individual named Researcher Smalls, who is assigned to the 3309 project.
Who's actually probably like 8 feet tall or something like that. It's always one of those things. You know, you call someone who's got the nickname Tiny, but they're actually, you know, a giant.
He ponders what exactly happens to these anomalies that they're making disappear.
True.
And what it would be like to simply fade away and disappear entirely, forgotten by everyone and everything. Another researcher then notes that Researcher Smalls did not attend some testing one evening, and no longer appears on any of their itineraries or project files.
Right.
A doctor
Yeah, I get
says
that.
that no one named researcher Smalls has ever been involved with the project. The researcher says that he
It's
must
just
be
Shaq,
mistaken
yeah.
because he knows researcher Smalls and knows him to be the best memeticist they have. If he's gone, then perhaps there's more to 3309 than they first thought, as Smalls was assigned to 3309 since it was first discovered.
So, like, yeah, I get this is kind of an overview of the general idea of pataphysics, which is essentially like fourth wall kind of breaking stuff that happens in the SCP universe again, where, you know, they realize that they are a universe that is fictional and subject to change by the whims of the authors creating it. And so for, you know, there's a lot of fourth wall kind of things that can happen in there that reflect on people actually making changes to articles, things like that. Yeah. So that's essentially, I guess, what the overall idea of pataphysics is like the SCP universe itself being aware of the fact that the real world, us, are making changes to it. And they are essentially aware of these changes.
The researcher also seems to disappear as their account is suddenly deleted. We then go exceedingly meta, as the final section of the 3309 page resembles a section of the SCP Wiki forums discussing 3309. Researcher Smalls posts here, asking what happened and if 3309 is causing this. He's reprimanded because role-playing is not allowed in the forums, but he continues. He says that the place he's in is devoid of anything, and something's gone wrong. He says that his name is Adamo Smalls. He studied at the University of Oregon, and the Foundation employed him in late 2010 as a memeticist, partially due to his high cognitive resistance value. He was on a long-term assignment to research SCP-3309, but they were fools to believe that they could play with the universe like that. He doesn't recall what exactly happened, but he can remember some things due to his capability for memetic retainment. 3309 started erasing things systematically, including personnel, entire task forces, Foundation sites, and sections of the entire organization, including the fundamental concepts that allow them to create the Foundation.
Gotcha.
He wonders if he was one of the erased personnel, and says that he doesn't want to be forgotten. This is about as pataphysical as we can get.
Right.
The idea that, to us, these individuals are just words on a web page.
Right.
Utterly fictional and ultimately meaninless.
Alive in their
To
own
them,
version
however,
of reality.
on a narrative level below us, they are real humans.
Yeah.
And to be erased so emotionlessly sends them to what is literally their hell, a realm of nothingness. Somehow Smalls was able to maintain a connection long enough to share some information.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, like, every time we put on a movie, every time we read a book, every time we watch a TV show or whatever, we're opening essentially a portal to view that reality at that point in time, kind of a thing. Yet that, you know, that reality still goes on and does its own thing after we turn the TV off, etc. Right.
Information to the SCP Wiki, but he too will eventually be erased and forgotten. The article finishes with, "And so the question remains, are you worth remembering?" You likely find that SCP to be either deep or tragic or utterly nonsense, which I suppose is sort of how you...
Yeah, which then kind of brings up again, like I was saying, kind of the idea of like, A, is that how our reality is too? Are we just a thought or an imagining of another higher being than us? And then are we in ourselves gods in a certain way because we are imagining and we're creating realities, ideas, concepts all the time, you know, even if they're just there for a brief second, but they still existed and on some level of reality do exist somewhere, you know? Yeah, that's kind of what the pataphysics concept is.
You might find pataphysics in general. Let's finish with an especially interesting SCP, which doesn't really involve the SCP Wiki at all. SCP-27
It's kind of like another layer, even beyond like the multiverse, essentially. Like the multiverse is essentially multiple universes on our same plane of reality that just like exist or vibrate on just a different space, so that they're just different enough. And then, you know, each one blends off another spectrum, blah, 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 blah. But then like pataphysics is kind of more like an up and down version of the multiverse, where there's different realities above and below us on top of that.
747 is a phenomenon appearing in print and online media, whereby platforms dedicated to the discussions of works of fiction begin to mention a non-existent instance of fictional media. In other words, people talking about fiction begin to discuss something that is completely non-existent, treating it as if it were real. These discussions range from brief mentions or comments to entire academic essays. What's more, these discussions include descriptions, screenshots, photographs of physical copies, and brief segments of text from the non-existent work. The descriptions are entirely consistent with one another, and the Foundation has found it's possible to completely reconstruct a non-existent piece of media just based on all these discussions. When questioned, people involved in these discussions deny having written the affected material, and deny the existence of the media in question. The Foundation has yet to find these discussions occurring in real time, only finding them after the fact. Additionally, they have only found these discussions after January of 2008.
Interesting.
None seem to exist before that.
Is that
it's
when
the Foundation's belief that
Is that when the SCP universe essentially started? Was that date that you just mentioned? What was it? Something January 2008?
Additionally, they have only found these discussions after January of 2008.
Yeah, so is that when the SCP universe, I assume, started, was January 2008?
None seem to exist before that. It's the Foundation's belief that 2747 seems to be evidence of a naturally occurring anafabula, or anti-narrative.
Anti-fabula.
There are various ways to explain this, but basically consider it like an anti-meme, which destroys thoughts.
Gotcha.
The anafabula destroys narratives, to the degree that when the narrative is destroyed, it not only is erasing an entire fictional world, but it is also erasing it from the real world's existence. In this case, the SCP universe.
Gotcha.
These anafabulas seem to be popping up naturally, meaning that through a unique combination of concepts, tropes, and signs throughout different narratives, the anafabula is coming into existence, leading to the narrative's destruction. The Foundation can't figure out firsthand what this combination is, since it destroys the narrative as a result, but they're working on piecing it together. We're then given a partial list of some of these destroyed narratives that the Foundation has uncovered. One short story written in 1951 describes an unnamed protagonist's journey towards a desolate black-horned mountain in order to deliver a gift to an unspecified recipient. His journey is rough and treacherous, and he ends up dying of exhaustion, appearing to be no closer to his goal than when he began. An animated film, described as a psychological thriller, chronicles a struggling manga artist as she attempts to complete and publish her first work under a tight deadline. Stress takes its toll, and she begins to hallucinate, with the film described as occasionally deeply disturbing. A turn-based role-playing game released for the GameCube in 2005, in which the player controls a party of 6 unnamed characters as they explore a ruined kingdom in order to find a lost companion referred to as Sister. It was apparently widely panned by reviewers.
Well, we got a high fleet here. We're in the 40K
seemingly
again.
Incomplete graphics, and being impossible to complete. The game's NPCs continuously mention a coal-black, thorn-bound tome that would allow someone to obtain great power or unleash a dreadful curse. This tome doesn't seem to be in the game, with one reviewer stating that it's not even in the game's coding. A work of collaborative fiction titled The Scolopendra Wiki, dedicated to horror, speculative fiction, and weird fiction genres. The exact nature of its plot is hard to discern, involving vastly different storylines and a range of character interpretations, as well as other fictional universes and settings. A cast of 7 characters seem to wander between a series of realms, collecting items possessing supernatural or abnormal properties, including a 7-sided obsidian emblem said to possess the power to destroy any object, person, or abstract concept with a single touch.
Interesting.
It's apparently in the hands of a sinister, unnamed antagonist who is never seen. A musical album put out by the English rock band Radiohead, consisting of 6 tracks. The majority of the tracks appear to consist mostly of digitally manipulated samples from their previous albums, layered over with sparse acoustic instrumentation and vocals. Reviews were highly positive for the most part, and one reviewer believed the album's central theme to be spirals of isolation and inspiration, of feedback loops that resonate into the level of the deeply personal, the trembling core of creative psyche. A novel described as the contents of a manuscript and accompanying charcoal illustrations from a reclusive writer and artist diagnosed with schizophrenia.
This has, what's it called? The second Indiana Jones movie, The Temple of Doom. This is very much Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom vibes.
A nested frame narrative about a 17th century Dutch mystic who dreams of a supernatural being that is aware of its nature as a dream entity, and is indebted to the mystic for bringing it into existence. In exchange, it divulges the secrets of the Earth, describing the 6 layers of the planet, including the cold and silent one at its core. Finally, an interactive novel of the mystery genre, consisting of a series of narratives from the
There's nothing mysterious, about the 40K universe.
Points of view of 6 characters, and a stream of consciousness narration of ambiguous provenance. Eventually, the narratives converge at a roadside diner during a thunderstorm, where the characters exchange stories, and the later tales intertwine and reveal further information about the earlier ones. Obviously, none of these works are especially generic, but what exactly they all have in common that creates the Anafabula is a bit trickier to discern. In order to find out what exactly the combination is that creates this Anafabula, the Foundation creates a procedure in which they have computers set about to constantly create procedurally generated narratives.
Okay.
These computers are
So they essentially are having ChatGPT constantly creating new stories.
Presumably churning out massive amounts of new stories, along with descriptions of every story. If a description is found without an accompanying story, that means the Anafabula was created, and they can modify their procedure to narrow things down.
Okay.
The final appendix is their report on the project's overall results, which turns out to be deleted. Well,
yikes.
Of course, they can't really define the Anafabula properly without it destroying that information.
Yeah.
What's worse is that the Foundation eventually came to realize the fact that started this whole pataphysical discussion. That being that they are in fact a fictional universe, and our universe is above theirs. If this Anafabula is recreated through some unlikely means in their universe, their narrative, their universe will be destroyed as well.
Yeah.
Overall, the SCP universe is filled with universe-destroying anomalies, but here's another one that's unpredictable and uncontainable. Their universe might just suddenly pop out of existence one day, with nothing they can do about it. So, what exactly is pataphysics? Well, I'd be lying if I said I was completely sure, but that's okay. It generally involves layers of narratives, and the imaginary interacting with the non-imaginary. But where exactly metaphysics becomes pataphysics is a little difficult to discern. Regardless, these are all really interesting and unique SCPs, from Garfield to universe destroyers.
Okay. We're getting a quote? No quote. No quote. Feels bad, man. So yeah, I get the overall idea. This is essentially just a video of him giving examples of SCPs that are kind of, things that are fourth wall breaking things outside of the SCP universe that affect the SCP universe. you know, layers of reality. Our reality is above theirs, and thus we essentially have control of that reality, whether it be by thinking about it, writing stories about it, etc., and various objects and SCPs and things inside their reality that essentially connect to us, that break the fourth wall, that change things in the SCP's reality. That's essentially what the overall idea of pataphysics is. And they're interesting concepts, especially if they're done right. There's one story in particular that's the SCP-001 proposal. The idea that they find this book and, you know, the book, like, is the narrative of their universe. Like, I guess if they can write things in the book, it can change things in there in certain ways, but the outcome is always the same, like you'd mentioned, etc. So that was, I think, the most interesting concept and idea of pataphysics that I've gone through in any of the SCP stuff so far. But yeah, great video giving examples of what pataphysics is and what to look for. I don't think there have been many that I can, off the top of my head, think of that are, other than the other super powerful reality bender that is like the most powerful reality bender ever, whose consciousness has gone beyond the SCP reality and is essentially able to jump through different layers of reality. That would be the other kind of pataphysics story, I guess, that I can think of off the top of my head that I've got into. I don't know of anything else off the top of my head that would consider pataphysical. But yeah, so there we go. That was Exploring the SCP Foundation, Pataphysics by the Exploring series. Links down below, as always, in the description to the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to the Exploring series channel. Please do me a favor, click those links if you enjoyed this video. Go over there and give it a like, and if you are a fan of the Exploring series and the content he makes, if you're not already subscribed to him, please do me a favor of going over there and hitting the sub button on his channel. He definitely deserves it. He makes a lot of great content for this SCP universe as well as others. So definitely go over there and check that out. If you'd like to join us when we do these discussions live, as you can see, we are right now. We'd love to have you guys come in here, join the discussions, and, you know, add your 2 cents to them. There is a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I offer. If you've been around the channel for a while and decide you want to take your support to the next level, check that out and see if any of those benefits and tiers would have any kind of interest for you. But thank you guys for watching. Hope you're having yourselves a wonderful day whenever you're watching this. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and a sub. That helps me and the channel grow. We'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.